I'd like to welcome everyone. It's November 17th, 2020, and I'd like to call our meeting to order. It is now 6 o'clock p.m. I call to order the November 17th, 2020 Board of Trustees meeting. As a brief update to you, after the November 3rd election, the Board of Trustees election results required a recount according to South Carolina legislation. The new board members were certified on November the 11th, and again, according to state law, do not take office until 1 week following certification. Therefore, our new board and re-elected board members will begin their term on November 19th, 2020. In the interim, the current board will conduct board business this evening. And I'd like to take a point of privilege, and I'd like to welcome back Mr. Anderson, Ms. Green, and Dr. Powers, who are all re-elected. And we would like to welcome Ms. Kathy Henson, who will be joining the board on officially November 19th, but she'll be sworn in December. So, and I also want to take a point of privilege and thank all the people who ran. I think it just says a lot. This position does not pay. It's strictly voluntary. And for people to put their name, stick their necks out, put their name on the ballot and say that they wanted to represent children, I think says a lot. So I want to thank all the candidates who ran for school board in Lexington 1. Do I hear a motion to enter executive session to consider employment recommendations for the 2020-2021 school year?
Madam Chair. Oh, I'm sorry. Who's got it?
I'm sorry, I didn't think, sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
All right. Madam Chair, I move the board enter into executive session to consider 2020-2021 employment recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anderson. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Ms. Green. Are there any questions or comments, board? All in favor of entering into executive session, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries and it is unanimous, and we are now in executive session. No? Okay. Okay, we'd like to welcome everyone back. Do I hear a motion to conclude executive session and begin the general session?
Madam Chair, I move that we conclude executive session and begin open session.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Are there any questions or comments, board? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? The motion carries, and it is unanimous. I would like to welcome you to the general session of the November 17th, 2020 board meeting. And we are in the season of Thanksgiving, and we have so much to be thankful for. We have our new board member tonight joining us, Ms. Henson. And then we had the re-election of Dr. Powers, Ms. Green, and Mr. Anderson. And let's give them a round of applause. And I would like to notify you that we are in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. We are meeting tonight in compliance with CDC recommendations. The auditorium has been thoroughly cleaned and sanitized before the meeting and will be after the meeting as well. District staff will also sanitize the microphone before and after staff presentations or individuals speaking during citizens' participation. All board members, employees, or other individuals in attendance are encouraged to social distance and must wear a face covering at all times. There is limited seating to maintain social distancing. Once that seating is filled, attendees will be asked to go to the staff development room, the overflow room, where they can watch the meeting while observing social distancing guidelines. And I don't think we have that problem tonight. We got a lot of chairs to choose from tonight. The public is encouraged to watch the meeting on our YouTube channel. After the meeting, the district will follow its previously established process by posting a video of the meeting to the district's YouTube channel, Lex One video site, and our own website. We would like to notify you that we are in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act and that we have notified the media of the date, time, and place of this meeting. We would also like to notify you that we do tape this meeting for accuracy in preparing the minutes. And at this time, I'm going to call on Dr. Kyle Guyton, who will lead us in our invocation and our Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Guyton?
Thank you. So let us bow. We thank you, O God, for just this time to reflect, this time to sit back and attempt to understand what we've experienced in these past several months and where we go from here. It has not been easy. It has been probably the most difficult that our students, our staff, our parents, grandparents, anyone who touches the life of a child has struggled, and we continue. And hopefully, we will begin to see a shift in the tide. We understand that we must hold true. We must hold ever vigilant to those who we trust, those who are in leadership, and ultimately to you. And so we ask always for continued guidance, for continued understanding, and most of all, for continued patience. Amen.
Amen. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Dr. Guyton. Board, in front of you, you have an agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Green. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Oswald? Are there any questions or comments, board? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor of the agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries, and it is unanimous. Board members, you have received the minutes of the October 6th, 2020 and the October 20th, 2020 board meetings. Other than corrections that have already been received and made, are there any other corrections? Hearing none, the minutes will be accepted as presented. We had, these are reports and action items from executive session. Do I hear a motion to approve 4 certified recommendations for the 2020-2021 school year?
Ms. Smith, I think you may need to appoint a secretary for the meeting.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Green. I would like to ask Ms. Green to serve as secretary, since our secretary is, he is actually being certified to continue to be a doctor. And he said in order to keep his license, he had to go to Missouri and do that. So tonight, Dr. Powers is not here. Ms. Green, would you mind stepping in for Dr. Powers?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Do I hear a motion to approve 4 certified recommendations for the 2020-2021 school year?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve 4 certified recommendations as made by administration for the 2020-2021 school year.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Do I have a second? Okay, thank you, Mr. Anderson. Are there any questions or comments regarding these 4 certified positions? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries and it is unanimous. We are now going to citizens' participation. Do we have any cards? Has anyone submitted that they would like to speak? Okay, and there is no one in the audience that wants to speak? I'm going to skip those many, many paragraphs, if that's okay with you guys, if we're not going to have anyone speak tonight. But as always, the board welcomes speakers. Anytime you want to come, please join us if you want to speak in person. We also welcome your contacts by email, text, telephone call, and if you even want to meet us at Rush's for a hot fudge cake and a cup of coffee, we will do that too. So just want to let you know that your board is accessible. At this time, we're going to go to 9.0, which are action items, we're going to go to 9.1, which is the temporary suspension of board policy IKAA, test and examinations. And let's go ahead and get a motion and a second on the floor, and then we'll get Dr. Talley to walk us through it. So do I hear a motion that the board approve the administration's request to temporarily modify board policy IKAA, tests and examinations due to COVID-19?
Madam Chair, under the guidance of policy BDH, suspension of policies, which gives the board the ability to temporarily suspend board policies due to extreme emergencies, I move that the board approve the administration's request to temporarily modify board policy IKAA, tests and examinations due to COVID-19. The modification would temporarily adjust the cumulative end-of-course examination weight to 10% in the final course average.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Oswald. Do I have a second? Okay, thank you, Ms. Green. Okay, Dr. Talley, we're going to turn it over to you to walk us through this recommendation, and then we'll take a vote after that, board. So, Dr. Talley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Dr. Guyton mentioned in his prayer, these are very unusual times. They're difficult times for our school district, and we are examining all of our policies, and we have done that with our instructional practices for tests and examinations. And in that examination, we have determined the need to temporarily suspend policy IKAA, tests and examinations, and that is allowed by the board policy, suspension of policies. Districts have also received a memo, superintendents did, from State Superintendent Molly Spearman, giving districts the permission to waive the current 20% requirement for all end-of-course assessments taken in the 2020-2021 school year as part of a student's final grade. The superintendent did give districts the flexibility to waive all of that percent or to make a determination about what percent that would count. And in our district, we have determined that we would want to weight that 10%. And I'm requesting your approval of that this evening. I will tell you that this policy has not been revised since 2005. So the reason we're temporarily suspending the policy is Dr. Rivers will work with a team to, later in the year, to revise that whole policy in totality. So I am seeking your approval for that tonight.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Talley. Are there any questions or comments, board, before we take a vote?
I'd like to make a comment here. I did some homework on this and contacted several teachers, retired and current teachers, just to ask them how they feel about it, as it was presented to us. And I had no idea how strongly they felt about this. But I think they'd like to see this permanently, is the way I read it. So.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'll tell you, I too have reached out to our teachers, as has Dr. Rivers, and we've reached out to our principals and certainly our instructional team, and they feel like this is the right move, so I appreciate you saying that. And I will tell you that we will be having a robust conversation later this year about grading in general. So that should come as no surprise to any of you.
Dr. Talley, I actually have a question, and this is probably just semantics, but my brain is a little confused on this. So are we suspending the policy, or are we changing the policy from 20 to 10%?
We are changing the policy temporarily from 20% weighting to 10%.
Okay, so we're not suspending the policy, IKAA. We
That's
are
right.
modifying the policy temporarily.
We have a policy that allows us to do what we're doing. Does that help?
And I think the reading of the actual, do I hear a motion from the board to approve the administration's request to temporarily modify
That's right.
the board policy? And I think the heading might be, it says suspension, but I believe modify is the correct word, and that is the language we're approving.
Okay,
That is
because
correct.
Thank you, Ms. Green. That's a
yes.
good point. Okay, any other questions or comments, board?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. I got a lot of feedback from teachers as well, and they're concerned that they won't even come close to covering the material that's in these EOC exams. And they said these students will be responsible for all of that content, and yet that test will still count as 10% of their entire semester grade. And I have pulled up the memo from Molly Spearman as well, and she says in there that teachers can have discretion in counting any teacher-developed or curriculum-based measurement in the calculation of the grades. Why can we not do away with the EOC and come up with something district-wide to let teachers come up with a test that counts for 10%?
Well, the state is requiring that students take the end of course. That's not negotiable.
Right.
What the waiver would do is you would not have to count at anything. And we do feel that there should be a measure of accountability. And we feel like 10% is that measure of accountability.
But if they're being assessed on information that they haven't even covered during that semester, because it's my understanding that the EOC exam is not being modified because of COVID, but teachers won't have time to cover all of that curriculum during the semester.
Well, and I do feel like that we will work with our students and certainly give them all the grace we can during this time, but the recommendation is for 10%.
Okay. Does anybody else have any thoughts? Because, I mean, they're going to be tested on material that hasn't been covered.
I mean, Dr. Talley, have you had any feedback from teachers, or maybe Dr. Rivers can address this, that their pacing is off and that they won't complete the curriculum in time for the EOC?
Well, remember, in the hybrid model, our students are working 4 days, 2 days face-to-face and 3 days online. So, I mean, I feel like they're doing the very best they can. I feel like they're doing a really good job. We have looked at, Dr. Rivers and I spoke earlier this evening, we have analyzed the first quarter grades, and I feel pretty good about where we're headed, at least in our hybrid model.
Well, and kind of as far as like considering the calendar, they will, when the EOC falls in January, they will have the same amount of time that they would typically have.
That's right, that's right.
Okay, I just know some teachers said, for example, my suggestion would be to let EOC courses make their own final exam that counts 10% instead of the state EOC. That way the teachers know what they have taught, and then they can administer the test based on what they've taught and not a test that's been given to them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can appreciate that, but I will say that moving forward, students are going to be held accountable for the EOC. Not only this year, but subsequent years. I don't see that going away.
Right, but in this year, I mean, you know, everything has changed. And if they're saying, did this go through a committee or anything? This 10%, how did we come up with that figure?
We did, Dr. Rivers met with high school principals and assistant principals and instructional staff. And I also will tell you that all of the districts in the Midlands are doing 10%. I did check with chief academic officers to find out what they were doing.
Okay. I just know the teachers I've talked to, they would just like to see something done differently. But along those lines as well, policy IKA, it also contains an administrative rule that applies the 20% weighting to the EOC as well in that policy. So that's one that would have to be, I guess, modified, suspended, whatever language we're using there. And as I was reading through that policy, I came across, as part of that policy, students' progress in grades 2 through 12, it says is reported with a numerical grade and a letter grade. We got an email on September the 25th that says some tweaks were being made to the grading practices at the elementary school. And so I later found out that student progress is now being reported as a performance rating, such as not yet met, partially met, not assessed. This would require a board vote as well if we're actually changing the way we're reporting grades and student progress.
That's right, and that when I said we are going to revisit those policies, that would include the elementary grading as well. I believe, I can't remember what board meeting, but I believe Mr. Bowers presented to the board the new way we were going to be assessing students in elementary and how we're going to report those grades.
Okay. I know someone sent me a report card, and I was thinking, well, if that's part of a policy and the board never voted on it, I didn't know how that was possible that we changed the grading scale, but, okay.
Any other questions or comments, board?
I will say, I know I've talked about this in the past, I would like for the board to have their own committee made up of teachers, school staff, because I'm hearing they're also required to give nothing less than a 45 on individual assignments. They were told that the 9 weeks grade couldn't be lower than a 45, but now they're being told that they can't give anything lower than a 45 for an assignment. So students are thinking along the way, whereas they would normally have a 0 as a placeholder if they didn't do their work, now they have to put a 45 there. So students actually think their grade is higher than what it is. So now they're doing even less than what they would be doing.
I can respond to that. Ms. Garris, that has actually been in place,
Probably
I guess, 6 years
Yeah, I was gonna
ago
say
when we
8 years
changed our
maybe.
grading practices. We had lots of conversations from a lot of stakeholders, and we did a lot of research. And this district decided at that time to not give a grade of 0 to students, because if you're averaging a 0 at the very beginning of a quarter, the student is defeated for the rest of the year. So that's when we did change our grading policies. That's not new.
Right, for the end of 9 weeks, they would go back and put a 45, but now they're saying, I guess in the past, it hadn't been done on individual assignments. So now teachers are saying, whereas they would put a 0 in for an individual assignment and then go back at the end of the 9 weeks and change the grade to a 45 if it was anything less than that. Now they're actually having to put a 45 in there instead of a 0 along the way.
Well, again, it's to give grace to students, and in a time that we're in where we feel like there needs to be a lot of grace given so we do no harm to students.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments, board? Okay, hearing none. We do have a motion on the floor from Mr. Oswald. We have a second from Ms. Green. I'm going to reread the motion. The motion is to approve the administration's request to temporarily modify board policy IKAA regarding tests and examinations due to COVID-19. You've heard the response from Dr. Talley. All in favor of modifying policy IKAA, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, and it is unanimous. Okay. We're now going to go to 9.2, which is a proposal to change the December 8th, 2020 board meeting to December 1st, 2020. Let's go ahead and get a motion and a second on the floor, and then we'll turn it over to Ms. Hill to walk us through the reasoning for this. Do I hear a motion to move the Board of Trustees board meeting from December 8th, 2020 to December 1st, 2020?
Madam Chair, I move that the board change the Board of Trustees meeting from December 8th, 2020 to December 1, 2020.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Guyton. Do I have a second?
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Okay, we now have a motion and a second on the floor. Ms. Hill, you want to walk us through that change, please?
Sure. As you know, we set the year's board meeting schedule ahead of time. We'll start visiting that in the new year when we come back in January. But we had previously set a December 8th meeting, but there are several reasons we'd like to see if we would like your approval to move that to December the 1st. One of the reasons is that we have important opportunity to speak at the Lexington County Stormwater Utility Fee County meeting, where they'll be presenting that. Mr. Salters is going to talk about that later, but it would be a conflict on the 8th that we would need for board members and who have expressed an interest in going, and several administrators who would need to go. So that's one conflict. We also need an earlier meeting than the 8th to ask the board to consider a time-sensitive financial matter. And now that the board is official on this Thursday, we could also do the swearing in earlier and have the new board members start to serve, so we could begin that on December 1st. So there's a plethora of reasons that we think justify asking for a week earlier than we had originally planned.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Hill. Are there any questions or comments regarding this calendar change, board?
Yeah, do our, traditionally, that's a funny word these days, do we conflict with other governing bodies typically? So, is it
Does
traditional?
our meeting fall on the same meeting date and time as them? Not as often as you might think would be possible with the town count, three different towns, town council meetings and county council meetings. I think this one is of significant importance because it's going to affect the district directly, as Mr. Salters is going to talk about. So, so it's unusual that we find a need to actually appear at a meeting and speak. Even if they do meet on the same date and time occasionally, it's not a conflict for us as far as business that we need to attend to. But this would be important business that we believe we need to be there to represent the district.
Well, and I guess I would probably make the argument that we would probably want to consider, if it's always, county council always meets on the third Tuesday of every month, and we always meet on the third Tuesday of every, we may want to,
Sure.
at some point in the future, sort of visit that, because I think if anything, COVID has taught us, the need for us to have good communication across the board, left hand knowing what the right hand is doing,
Well,
so on and so forth. And so while this move is for a specific purpose, I think in the global picture,
Right.
it's probably not a bad idea anyway. So that way we can kind of have some almost inter-office kind of representation or conversation or whatever it may be.
Right. We
as a
can
part of these.
certainly do that as we present the next year's. So we do have to create that schedule, so we can certainly look at that and consider that in that. That's a
Yeah,
good
I just
point.
don't know if there's typicals. I'm sure there's a typical for
They
county
typically meet
council.
on the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month, like
Yeah,
the
they
county
do.
council
And
does.
the town
Okay.
of Lexington meets on Mondays.
Yeah.
And
And
I
I
think
th- and I
sometimes they
think-
meet in the afternoon.
Yeah, last week, the county
County
council
council
started at
starts
like,
at like 4.
Yeah, they meet earlier.
and I think typically our additional meeting each month usually is on the first Tuesday, but we went to the second Tuesday. This is just a weird confluence of changes that we need to change again.
Yeah, and Christmas, and
right.
it's everything.
It just is this, it's the timing, the year, the calendar, the Thanksgiving, the Christmas, the new
COVID, all
board
that.
elections, right. It just,
It's 2020. That's all you need to say, it's 2020. Okay, we now have all that. I think we've ironed out every inch of that calendar change. So board, let's take a vote. All in favor of moving from December 8th, 2020 to December 1st, 2020, please say aye. Any opposed? The motion carries, and it is unanimous. At this time, we're going to turn over to the superintendent's report, and 10.1, I'm going to call on Dr. Little. Dr. Little?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Board. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to just be very quick. I just want to celebrate one quick thing. On yesterday, I was going to say on Monday, making it feel like it was more dramatic, but it was really yesterday. We welcomed back our 7th and 8th graders for our middle schools, and so we are now K through 8 are attending the 4+1 model, and we are very excited about that. And Dr. Rivers is going to give us an update on really where we are in phase 2 as of November 17th, and he has I think some good information for us tonight. I know one of the things that everybody is curious about is kind of where we are with the Lula for next semester. I think we're just over 18% of students who are still choosing Lula for next semester. Many of them are the older that they get. A lot of the changes from our elementary and middle school grade levels, and I think we'll be able to walk through that a little bit of that explanation tonight. But would like to welcome Dr. Rivers here tonight as we walk through a phase 2 academic reentry plan update.
Thank you, Dr. Little, and good evening, Madam Chair, board members. And this evening, I'll be presenting an update on the academic reentry plan for high schools. Before I discuss these updates, I'd like to share with you an overview of the lessons we learned during the first 9 weeks.
It's a very dramatic pause there when we're talking about lessons.
Okay. Okay, there we go. So what did we learn during the first 9 weeks? We learned that the impact of exposure in quarantining students and our staff is far more significant when we are not able to socially distance. We learned that quarantining is disruptive to the educational environment. We learned that while the hybrid model is not ideal, it provides a stable educational experience for our students. We learned that it is easier to organize for social distancing at the elementary level. We learned that it will take deliberate steps with safety checks in between to keep our schools open for face-to-face learning. This next slide represents the model that we are using to make informed decisions on maximizing face-to-face instructions. This involves assessing our situation, planning our procedures, and acting on our plans. We said from the beginning that we will do our very best to be very deliberate with our decisions. Next, I would like to remind you of our first transition target timeline. Our school year started on Monday, August 31st. Seems like such a long time ago, but not really. 5 weeks later, on October 5th, we transitioned our youngest learners, pre-K through 2nd grade, in cohorts A and B back to school in the 4+1 model. We also brought back students with IEPs served in self-contained classes in grades 3 through 12, and some English language learners in grades 3 through 5. And that was on October 5th. 2 weeks later, on October 19th, we transitioned grades 3 through 5 in cohorts A and B back to school. So at that point, we had all students back in our elementary schools. At that time, at one of our school board meetings, we decided that middle school would return in early November. On this slide, we see that on November 9th, cohorts A and B for 6th grade returned to school in the 4+1 model. This week, on Monday, November 16th, we welcome cohorts A and B for grades 7 and 8 back to school. So now we have all our students in grades pre-K through 8 back in school in the 4+1 model. This now leads me to share the date of return for high school students. Our high school students will return to school in the 4+1 model on January 19th for 2nd semester. Although we discussed the possibility of bringing high school students back to school earlier in December, January, before the beginning of 2nd semester, and after the installation of plexiglass in our classroom, we realized that might be an unnecessary disruption. At that time, we will also have students who have selected to switch from Lula to face-to-face return to our school. So when we come back in January, we'll make that switch. Parents who are making a decision to come back from Lula to face-to-face will have that option, and they've taken the survey, so we welcome more students back on January 19th. There are several considerations that I would like to share regarding a decision to wait until the second semester for students to return to 4+1 model. First, high school schedules are not assigned solely by grade. So when you think about elementary school and middle school, we can bring one grade level back in at a time. There's not much disruption. Unlike the elementary and middle grades, it is impractical to phase in high school students since their schedules are not assigned strictly by grade. For instance, a freshman may have a first block class with seniors and a second block class with sophomores and freshmen. Next, in high school, some of our staffing ratios are much larger in those classes. This means we could have more students in the classroom compared to elementary and middle school. And elementary, as you know, has that family model in place. Next, we want to minimize staff and student exposure. That was one of our considerations. The other consideration that we have right now, we're in our Thanksgiving and winter break exposures. And so we're noticing some things happening in our communities as far as spikes in the increase in number of COVID cases. And so that Thanksgiving break, making sure our students and families are safe before they go home and when they return, as well as winter break around that time frame too. Next, it is possible that we will have to quarantine more students and staff. So when you think about the elementary model, it's a family model, but in high school, students move class and there are more transitions and they're in different classes as individuals. So there's more opportunities to quarantine students and staff once someone is exposed. And as I just mentioned, we are seeing an increase in the number of COVID-19 cases in the community. And that was another consideration we had for waiting for high school return in January 19th. Also, one thing, once we come back from winter break on Monday, January 4th, teachers will spend that time with their students reviewing for exams. So it's kind of a review week that we're talking about. And then the next week, we will be administering exams. So if we were to come back in January, that's a review time period. And then it's also a time to take exams. And so there was a consideration we had to wait until January 19th at the start of second semester. Once we factor that in, it seemed wiser not to disrupt the semester right now before exams when we could wait a few weeks and instead begin when the second semester starts. The next thing that we've talked about is what about those students who are struggling? And that can be students who are in face-to-face and students are also in Lula. And that's the online academy. Teachers and administrators will reach out to students struggling in first semester and provide greater support to them during these last few weeks of the semester. And so as we head into the second 9 weeks now, second quarter, we'll begin reaching out to students and trying to help them before the semester is over. We will continue to bring back students from the online academy. From the beginning in August till now, high schools have been very accommodating to families who wanted to make a switch from Lula. They made decisions that was in the best interest of their child over the summer. They noticed that their child is struggling in Lula online, so they would contact Central Services, Instructional Services, and say, can my child transfer to face-to-face, the hybrid setting? And in many cases, we had space, so we would accommodate those parents in high school on an as-needed basis. And so they would make those phone calls. I would check with the high school principals to see if there was space there, and we would move them back. So that's been ongoing since August 31st up until now. Another way we'll help students who are struggling, we're going to use our Fridays for extra help sessions and to support teacher-student conferences too. And so those Fridays are those e-learning virtual days. Teachers are available to have Zoom meetings. They are available for individual conferences and group help sessions too. And so we're going to continue to use those Fridays and maximize that time. We also have staff who are conducting home visits. When we know students are not engaged in Lula, we are finding time and using staff and administrators to make visits, social workers to make visits to home, and counselors to catch those students. And then we will offer some grade recovery for first semester assignments. Sometimes the students have missed an assignment and they earned a low grade. We're going to make time in this first semester so they can recover that grade to hopefully improve their average in the class. Some additional notes. Bringing high school students back will challenge us more than any other grade level has. Students change classes, as I mentioned, often during the day. They have additional opportunities to gather outside the classroom as they change classes. They participate in athletics, they participate in performing arts, and other activities, and that's the high school setting. From the very beginning, we committed ourselves to maximizing student and staff exposure, minimizing, student and staff exposure as much as possible to keep our students and staff safe. The better we do that, the safer our families are in the long run. I also want you to know that we recently looked at a number of failures from the first marking period in our secondary schools, and that's Q1 in the first 9 weeks. The data informed us that the students in our hybrid model were doing as well as or better than students at this time last year for Q1. And that's something good to know. When we talk about the hybrid face-to-face model, and that's right now for our high school students, that's 2 days of face-to-face instruction, 3 days of virtual. Middle school students have just gone back the last 2 weeks. So we looked at Q1 grades, and we had all secondary students, middle through high schools, in 2 face-to-face days. The number of failures from Q1 was better than or as good as it was Q1 in the previous school year. So the conclusion from that is hybrid face-to-face is working for our students. And I just kind of wanted to share that information. For the online academy, that is brand new. And so the number of student failures was higher for online academy students compared to the hybrid students. And that is to be expected right now. It's a new platform for our students. Teachers and students are getting used to it. And so we can't draw too many conclusions from it right now, but that's something that we're going to dig deeper in to see what's happening, what's going on, and how we can best support our students in that platform. So we're going to do all the interventions I just shared to help our Lula students, online students, to finish our semester and to bring their grades up. And we're going to intensify those efforts to support those students. At this point, this concludes the information for the return of high school students to the 4+1 model. We are suggesting that they return on January 19th at the beginning of second semester. If you have any questions, I can answer those now.
Dr. Rivers.
Yes.
It's Jada. Thank you for that. When you said Lula had a higher fail rate than hybrid, do you have those numbers with you?
I have some numbers. I can certainly share those after the presentation. And Dr. Phillips, his team gathered the numbers for us, so I would like for him to share them completely. But what I have right now, the number of students with at least 1 or more Fs for Q1 is right around 42% of our Lula students.
Okay, thank you. I know read something in the paper this week. Greenville County Schools actually released all of those results. So if you have any more, I mean, like you said, we can get together after the presentation, but I'd like to see some of those numbers for everything.
And then I'll just spotlight to compare the two. The face-to-face hybrid students, that was 15.1% or 15% of our students had at least 1 F in a class compared to online at 42%.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
You had an interesting comment in there where it said it was easier to organize social distancing at the elementary level. That almost runs counterintuitive to your thinking, because you would think K-5 are like herding kittens sometimes, and so to try to keep them 6 feet apart would be, an astronomical feat. But I guess what you're saying is the organization of keeping them distanced, as opposed to a high school where they are blended, changing classes, so on and so forth. It's more difficult to organize as opposed to implement, I guess. Is that a fair assessment?
That's correct. The family model, which we love, and it works so well in elementary school level, where you're just in that one class. And in many cases, most of us would tell you that sometimes the elementary students are slightly more compliant with knowing where they're supposed to sit and what they're supposed to do when directed by the teacher. And so that model works. And in addition, if you have to quarantine, you're just quarantining one classroom. And so when we talk about social distancing at the middle and even high school level, there's more movement in the hallways independently. Elementary students move together and under direction of an adult. Middle and high school transitions happen on their own. And so all those things increase the ability to contract or anything of that nature, and to social distance as well.
Sure. Yeah, and this is fairly consistent with what we see at our office level. I think for the most part, teenagers are adults, and once they have that driver's license and that mobility picks up, then their spread of COVID is going to pretty much be on par with what you would expect with the adult population. Middle school and younger, obviously different story. They're usually being taken somewhere by a parent, and the philosophy has been if you don't have to take them, you don't, sort of thing here recently. So we obviously aren't seeing the spread in our younger ages. So that kind of plays out with exactly what we're seeing in the community. And to your point, unfortunately, we are seeing the numbers kind of going in the wrong direction.
Yes.
Our fears are kind of coming a little bit true in that we're starting to see that spike. I would kind of caution and say that it's not the daily cases right now that alarm you so much. It's 10 to 15 days from now. And so while we may see 1,600 cases today, we may only see 7 deaths. Well, once you fast forward that, because of the amount of time it takes to get sick, and then the amount of time you spend in the ICU, and then the eventuality of potential death, that's usually 15 days down the road. Right. And so that's always the scarier thing to be concerned about is when we see this spike like this, what are things going to look like 2 weeks from now? That's the most alarming.
I would just like to take a point of personal privilege and give a shout out to Coach McKinney at River Bluff, who is my son's world history teacher and showed up at my house on Friday to give Trevor Oreos. He's been doing little mini games and contests each week, and every Friday he goes out. He said, I just wanted to see my kids. And so he's been going and taking pizzas and cookies and things. He's been to Peelian and out to Gilbert. And so just to see a teacher show up, it made my son's day, just to have that little bit of personal attention. So shout out.
Thanks for sharing.
Dr. Rivers, I did want to let you know, I have heard from several community members, and they didn't even know that this was going to be proposed, and this is what they proposed to me.
Great.
And the reason being is that we're so close to the end of the year, and they're worried about the spike at Thanksgiving and then how it could impact their Christmas holidays, their winter break. And they said everybody's kind of in a pattern now, and they thought it would be better to wait until January to bring the high school kids back, just to keep the numbers down for the COVID. And also, I did hear from several, they have college kids coming home next week, and they're very concerned about what those kids are going to bring home, and then the possibility of their younger kids taking that back into the high school. So just from the parents I've heard from, this is what they're telling me that they've wanted. So I just want to let you know that we're thinking, from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, we've had conversations with several students, and they don't want the disruption right now. They felt like it's a better transition, second semester, and too many things happening right now.
Right,
So, great
I
point.
agree. Any other comments or questions, board? Okay. Dr. Rivers, thank you so much. Is there
Okay,
anything
welcome.
else you
Thank you.
want to update us on? Okay, Dr. Little?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a operations update tonight from Mr. Salters. It's hard to go a month without some really great updates and pictures on where we're headed and what we're doing. Do you have a picture of my three-point shot in this presentation, this slide deck?
I didn't get approval to use that yet. Maybe we'll bring that out in December. Of course, I'm sure it's already all over the place. Might have been on ESPN, I'm not sure.
There's a chance. There's a chance.
There's a chance.
SC Top 10.
Thank you, Dr. Little. We do have a number of projects still ongoing right now in the district. I'll start with the new Peelian Middle School. And some of you are able to tour that facility recently. We're very excited about bringing this facility to the Peelian community. You can see from the aerial photo here that it looks very much like a finished product and getting ready for move-in. So this is a prototype design from Beechwood. The biggest difference in the two facilities is we had more room here to be able to move the auditorium and the gymnasium in a different configuration. So the auditorium is here, gymnasium is here on the front of the school, and you'll see that. It's a great shot of the parking lot and everything. Some of the grassing is gone in, and there are trees have been planted out there now, and it's really looking move-in ready, as we say. So closer shot of the front entry there. Looking over to the gymnasium side, again from the front parking lot. This is in the Center Commons area, familiar look from that second floor, main stairwell looking back out to the main entry, secured foyer area. And then you're looking up on the second floor, down the classroom hallway there. This is the cafeteria, and the courtyard will be out here to the right, serving lines here in this space. And looking out to that courtyard, that's not a fountain out there. That is just irrigation running. It does look like a. Some of these pictures turned out really well. So, but the school is in really good shape. It's clean and ready to go. We had our final inspection out there last week and it went very well. So, this is the dance room. They're excited about getting that dance program started at Pillion Middle School. These shot of one of the dressing rooms off to the side of the stage area. Science lab with the tables, everything installed, ready to go there. This is the auditorium. The seats are installed. They're just covered with plastic there for protecting those. So a few finishing touches left to go there. Looking back from the stage out to the projection area. And another shot from the side there. And this is the band room. The gymnasium where the infamous shot took place. And we actually have that divider there. You can imagine in middle school, the gymnasium is a very popular place after school with volleyball and basketball and things going on at the same time. So we have that divider so they can actually use both sides of that court for various sports.
Easy.
I'm not going to touch that. Y'all can settle that later.
Easy. That's a shot right there over the bow. I know it.
Through the plexiglass. This is a shot of the library. Furniture is coming in over the next few weeks, and that'll be filled with books here soon, so we're excited about that.
Mr. Salters, before you move on, can you remind the board and the public what the timeline is for move-in?
Sure. So we plan to start the bulk of the moving of, teacher materials the week of December 14th. We'll actually transition plexiglass and different things like that, last-minute items, those two virtual days right before the winter break. And then students and staff will occupy the building that first day back from winter break.
So January 4th.
January 4th.
They'll be back.
Yeah, that'll be the first official day. Exciting day for the community for sure. Moving on to the new Lexington Middle School replacement facility. This is a shot of that building. It looks eerily familiar because it's, again, a prototype plan, so you can see the classroom wings taking shape. This building is really coming out of the ground quickly. And we did a second floor concrete pour on Saturday, but you can see the classroom wings. There's decking on this second floor now, and they're beginning to set steel down here. Cafeteria, the library, and office areas poured. So these walls and areas are really beginning to move. It's a pretty tight site, so there's not a lot of lay down room. So you won't see the auditorium and gymnasium area really start to take shape until this gets a good bit further along. Here's another view of that location. There's a shot of the concrete pump truck. That was probably about 5:30 Saturday morning. A lot of activity going on there. And it's just looking over at that's actually the entry to the library area from that second floor overlook. And then moving on to Oak Grove Elementary School. I'm real excited about the classroom addition there. You see it's really moving forward very nicely. The exterior of the building's getting very close to being finished up. The interior of the building, we're about to finish up, ready for ceiling grid. And then we have a small storage building out in the rear of the facility that we're adding at each of our locations, and so that's being finished up as well. I think the schools are as excited about these storage facilities as anything. They need those spaces desperately.
You always want good closet space.
That's a fair point. Moving on to White Knoll Elementary School, we had a kindergarten classroom addition here, and again, the building is topped out at this point, and you can see it's off the front right of the existing building, and so this is the full classroom area here, and the blue is a waterproofing, so they're getting ready to start brick veneer here shortly. It's really moving along nicely. They're excited about having these additional kindergarten classrooms. And they'll have a new playground associated with that as well, off the front of the school there. Some interior shots of those classrooms. You're kind of looking in between the two classrooms. This is an office space in between those classrooms. You can see we have ceiling grid in and some lights and so forth installed already. So good progress being made at this job as well. Lexington Technology Center. We had a few things finishing up there. These canopies, a lot of the lab spaces in the tech center off the back of the building had areas where, roll-up doors and things like that, where students could move outside to work, but they really weren't protected when they were outside. So we've added some canopy spaces where they could go out and work under protection. So if it's raining or a lot of sun or whatever, they can have some protection. You can see these were added along the back of the building there. Going to really extend those classroom spaces outside, so be real helpful there. Did some improvements in the welding lab. The ventilation and the hood equipment is all being replaced, and so the students have these very high-tech welding systems and areas to learn that craft, which is very marketable these days out in the workspace. So we replaced those and have that new ventilation. Very excited about that. Moving on to White Knoll High School. You can see an aerial photo here. This is Platte Springs Road. So this would be kind of the front left of the building, White Knoll High School, where the classroom addition is, 32 classrooms. You can see actually on the second floor, the walls, much of this area are topped out for the second floor. So really making some great progress on this classroom addition. And it'll kind of come to here as an opening here, two-story opening, and then it'll turn. But you have classrooms along each side of the main hallway there. And that's a shot from the ground level. And there's an interior look at that. And there'll be a center stairway that feeds up to the upstairs in that space. Another ground level shot. And then we're also adding Performing Arts Center at White Knoll High School. And this is a really high up view, but it gives you an orientation of where this is. So the main entrance of the school is over here on the left. This is where the little theater was, and it's being repurposed as part of this project. And so the orchestra pit has been completed. That's actually a steel there for the proscenium opening for the main stage that will be eventually put in that location. And then we have some storm detention that was added as part of the project over on the student parking lot side of the campus. Moving on to River Bluff High School. As you recall, we had some issues there with a retaining wall that failed in the rear parking area of that location. A lot of work has gone on to excavate and get ready to rebuild that wall. You can see there used to be a sidewalk that came across through here. And actually, after removing some of the stuff, what we discovered is that sidewalk was basically floating in air about 10 feet down below it. There was no support. It kind of washed out underneath. So it's a pretty precarious situation. We're fortunate that we're able to catch that when we did. And so the crews have basically taken the wall down to where they can start to rebuild it. And so that work is starting here soon and should have that completed, I'd say within the next month or so. And we'll repair this parking lot and sidewalk and restore everything to its use.
Mr. Salters, did we ever determine what caused that wall to fail, or?
So what it appears is that some of the subsoil there was over time washed out by significant volumes of water that more than likely the 15 flood, that's a low point of that parking lot. And more than likely when that flood occurred, at that time there was water cresting over that wall. And it created kind of an even lower spot. And so it appears that just kind of over time that soil had just kind of seeped out from the exterior of the wall and just caused that unstable condition.
Was there any kind of guarantee on that since it's such a new wall, or?
Well, that wall was actually 10 years old.
Oh.
The school opened in 2013, but that wall was built very early on in that project. And most of that stuff has like a 2-year engineered guarantee. And so there's nothing at this point that, is any of the specs that would.
Is it the same company fixing it that you initially built it, or is it a different company?
We went back to the same wall design engineer.
I
Because
wouldn't think there'd be a lot of people that do that.
they're
so.
not. There's really only a couple qualified folks in South Carolina. And we're actually pulling them off of the Lexington Middle School replacement project to do some work over here to get this done.
Mr. Salters, what's the timeline for the Performing Arts Center at Gilbert High School?
So we are finished with the plans for that project, and we're in negotiations right now, contract negotiations with the contractor. And, we hope to have that project started within the next couple of months. And then that's probably about a year, 12-month build out. So hopefully, it probably won't be by the end of 21, but certainly early in 22, we'll have that. So mid-year next year, we'll have that building open. And as you recall, that includes a weight room and a wrestling room as well on the backside of that Performing Arts Center.
Thank you.
And Mr. Salters, what about the elementary school for the River Bluff area?
That's a great question. We are still in the process of looking for land for that facility. Unfortunately, it's become a real challenge to find any land to locate that school. In fact, we have a meeting scheduled, Dr. Lowell and myself, and some others on our team in the next week to kind of put our heads together and talk about that again.
Well, based on the floating wall at River Bluff, you could just like float it in the air somewhere over Corley Mill Road.
Yeah, I don't, maybe. Maybe. Unfortunately, they're not making any new land,
No.
and it's not very easy to come by. So we're certainly aggressively searching for an appropriate parcel, but haven't made any progress on that yet. Any other questions about the building plan? All right, well, thank you.
All right, what we would like to do next is provide you some information. So Ms. Hill referenced this in her reason why we're moving from December 8th to December 1st, board meeting coming up, and it's regarding the stormwater utility fee. Mr. Salters has pulled some slides from the county's presentation and wanted to share those with you tonight about the potential impact of this fee on our schools. And so, Mr. Salters, would you like to begin, please?
Sure. So This, I'll tell you, this is information that, you know, I'm gleaning from presentations that consultants have done for county council. So, you know, I'll kind of do a disclaimer at the beginning. If there are any inaccuracies, I apologize, but I'm doing these just to the best I've understand the calculations and things that they're using, and from multiple conversations with various sources that involved in this project. But Lexington County Council has begun entertaining the idea of a stormwater utility fee. And so just as background, as Dr. Little mentioned, I did pull some information from some presentations that have been done. The county basically, to their statements, have said that they have about $114 million worth of backlog for system-wide stormwater repairs. And, you know, you say, what is stormwater? You know, what does that even mean? So, you know, that's the culverts that you see around on the sides of the roads, the different pipes, concrete pipes under driveways, you know, the drainage things you see in parking lots and things like that. All of that stuff makes up a storm drainage system. And so those things need repair over time, and we certainly understand and support and recognize the need for that repair in the county. And so they have a backlog of about $114 million. There's several community flooding projects that they list, and so that's a $76 million problem. And then they indicate that these issues are increasing at a rate of about $5 million per year. And the problem is they only have about $3 million a year in their annual budget to allocate towards stormwater management. So you can see that math doesn't work very well. The problem continues to get away from them. And again, I want to reiterate, you know, as part of this presentation, we are acknowledging that this is an issue for the county and it needs to be addressed. And so, in looking at what the proposal that they have entertained does, they're establishing a stormwater utility fee. The fee is suggested initially to be constant for a 5-year period of time. The fee is based on the impervious square footage that you have on your site. So if you think about your house, you think about the roof structure that you have, you think about your driveway. If you have an outbuilding, you would include that roof structure as well. And you calculate the square footage of that space. In our situation, you think about this building, the parking lots that are adjacent to the building, the outbuilding that we have out there, those roof structures, you calculate those square footages of the impervious surface. They estimate a monthly fee of $6.50. In their original proposal, it had a range of $4 all the way up to $8. But they landed on $6.50, and that creates an equivalent residential unit. For residences, primary residences, your home, my home, the fee would be divided into 3 tiers, and you can see that there. 200 to 2,000 square feet of impervious surface, you pay a half of ERU, or $39 a year. It's $6.50 times that, you know, and that equates to $39 a year. 2,000 to 6,000 square feet, you pay a full ERU, or $78 a year. And then over 6,000, you pay 2 ERUs, and that's $156 a year. So that's for a residence. The commercial fee is based on an average ERU of 2,800. And then they also have a kind of a statement in there that's a little hard to follow because you don't really know exactly how this works, but there are potential credits that you can acquire for non-single family residential up to 50%. So basically anybody who's not a single family home can get some kind of credits, potentially. And that's for well-designed and maintained storm structures, that's for approved stormwater education programs, and there's a couple other things that qualify that might get you a credit on this fee or against this fee. So I'll give you a couple of examples. The impact on Lexington School District 1. I just took Forts Pine Elementary School, one of our smaller elementary schools. We have approximately 252,925 square feet of impervious surface on that campus. You take that and you divide it by 2,800, that comes up to 90.33 ERUs. You round to the nearest 0.5, so that's 90.5 times the 650. Gives you $588.25 a month, or around $7,000 a year that we would pay in a fee to the county for Forts Pond Elementary School. River Bluff High School, probably it is our largest facility for impervious surface. You do the math on that, and you can follow it. It ends up being close to $50,000 annually. Now, again, I haven't applied any discounts to this because I don't know how these discounts work. It's kind of unclear about that. But even potentially, let's say that we did get a discount, that's still $25,000 a year for River Bluff High School that we would pay in a fee, basically for stormwater management.
And I would say that all of our schools have done a really good job on mitigating stormwater, and that we comply with what we need to do when we build these big facilities, correct?
Right. So
So we're paying for people that haven't done that.
well, here's a couple of examples. So the upper left, this is the new Lexington Middle School site. So these are large underground detention pipes. And so this system is designed to capture stormwater. That after we create all this impervious surface, it captures the stormwater, it controls the flow of that stormwater, because ultimately when you build a building or create impervious surface, you cannot increase the velocity of the water leaving the site than it was before you did what you did. And so that's what these structures do. They slow the velocity of the water down so that it doesn't damage other homes. You can't redirect it. I can't be draining into this nice, natural drainway here and then redirect it so that I dump it on somebody's house over here. That's what you do with stormwater management. This is the picture I just showed you at White Knoll High School of an above ground storm detention system. It's hard to see here, but this is the new Pelion Middle School site in the back. This is a large storm detention above ground system that's similar to this, but it has a series of four other systems for infiltration because in Pelion there's not a real watershed because there's just sand everywhere, and so water goes down, it doesn't go out. And so what the strategy here is you collect it and then you let it seep over into these other ponds, and it will drain and infiltrate into the ground. So it's just a different design of system. This happens to be back at River Bluff High School back in probably 2011. Large underground storage system being put in place. So, Ms. Smith, to your point, we do a lot for stormwater management. Now, you look at some of our campuses that were built in the early 80s, they don't have this extensive stormwater development because the stormwater requirements in the county were not as extensive as they are now. So as they evolved, so too have our construction designs. But we take great care on our campuses to control stormwater. And every time we do an addition or make any modifications to a driveway, we have to go in and basically upfit that facility for stormwater management. So a good example, Lexington Elementary School, we just put an underground detention system in because we created a new driveway for parent drop-off. So that happens on a regular basis. So you look at our district-wide estimates. Now we estimated this, so they're going to have probably a slightly different number than we do because they have some satellite imagery that they'll use to create this, to get these numbers. And we use the county's GIS website to come up with these numbers. So we have about 17 million 139,695 square feet of impervious surface in the county. I will tell you that I cannot think of a larger entity in Lexington County than Lexington School District 1. We will have the most impervious surface in the county. I reached out to the hospital, and we've been talking some, and they don't have, they have less than a third of that number, or right at a third of that number. So we're significant. We are the largest impact in this fee for one entity. So when you do the calculations, you can see you end up with about a $40,000 monthly fee for our facilities. And so, that ends up being, ironically, $477,477 annually. So it's almost a $500,000 annual fee that we will begin being assessed on the October tax bills this coming year, should this move forward. Obviously, to make up this revenue loss, you, the school board, are limited by Act 388 in how you can offset this revenue. And so it would be a major impact on businesses, because should you have to raise taxes or raise millage to cover this cost, you have the restriction of only being able to raise that millage on businesses and 6% assessed property. So you couldn't affect homeowners when you do that. So our recommendation, and we've sent an email to county council, and I know that there's been other conversations as well. But our recommendation is not to do away with the fee. Again, we recognize the need, for stormwater management and for repairs to the systems and so forth. Our recommendation is to exempt any taxing authority within Lexington County, because essentially the county council is applying a tax to another taxing authority that will then have to apply a tax to offset the tax that was applied to you. The way we would recommend doing that would be to modify the ERU multiplier to make up for the lost revenue. So you take the $477,477 and you divide that out, and you increase the $6.50 multiplier by whatever the number needs to be when you back out the school districts in Lexington County and their contributing revenue, and apply that to the multiplier. That would spread the impact over all taxpayers, because remember, the county is applying this to every home, every business, every church, and currently every school. If we have to make up the revenue, we can only apply it to businesses and 6% assessment, okay? So by doing it this way, it would spread the impact that they need for their stormwater management over everyone involved. So that's the recommendation that we've put forward, and again, the timeline for this, they had first reading November 10th. They passed it with a 6-1 vote. And November, Dr. Little, when was the chamber meeting? Was it the 14th, or was it it may have been the 11th? I think it was the 11th. The next day, the chamber met, and they sent out an information flyer about this. And I think since that time, there's been a lot of conversations. I sent an email to the council before first reading, delineating our position. And so they've heard a lot of feedback since then. But the public hearing and second reading will be held on December 8th. And you'll have the opportunity at the public hearing, just like we do here, where you'll have 3 minutes, and they'll have a for and against sign up, and you'll be able to speak, regarding this tax. And then the third reading would be the final reading, and that would happen December 22nd. So it's very important. Yeah, I think that we get involved in this. I know there's been some communication with superintendents, and and some of you have had some conversations with other board members and so forth. Again, I want to reiterate, we understand the problem, we understand the need, but it's not appropriate to put you, the school board, in a position to have to raise a tax for something that's been taxed on you. If you study property tax legislation, similar concept, we don't pay property taxes, and there's a reason for that. And so in my mind, it's a very similar concept. So with that, that's kind of a summary of the problem or the issue going on. So happy to answer any questions for you.
Well, and the fact that we mitigate storm drainage problems when we build a facility, I think that's part of why we should be exempt from it.
Yes, sir. We spend a significant amount of money in site development. Now, you know, to the credit of the structure here, I understand that there will be a credit annually for that mitigation. You know, upwards of up to 50% of the tax, but we spend significantly more than that on site development to mitigate stormwater per the requirements of the county, which are, and again, those are all good requirements. Because as property owners, you don't want, you know, someone damaging your property. You want that water flow controlled, so.
When you talk to Mr. Murgo and some of the other council members, are they aware of the impacts on the school districts? Did they realize what you just explained to us? Did they realize the extent it was going to impact our school district and the other school districts?
They do now.
Okay.
Well, and I spent some time over the last week talking to board members from the other 4 Lexington County school districts, and we're going to work together as a united front to articulate to county council the impact this has on school districts. There's really not any mention in any of the proposal or anything about Act 388's existence and just how that plays into this idea. And so we're gonna, we've got a Zoom meeting this Thursday afternoon. If anybody else wants to attend, let me know. I'll send you the link. But the other 4 Lexington County school districts and us, we're gonna work together. We're gonna send a letter, and then also as many of us as possible can attend on the 8th at the public hearing and speak. I talked to 3 of our county councilmen last week, and I think the pushback has been swift and strong on this from a lot of different groups. So I think that they're getting a little squirrely about it, but I think that means that we just need to keep persist on this and show up on the 8th and let them know, because evidently there is one particular council person that's trying to push this through and get it done as quickly as possible. And so we just need to encourage the folks that are listening to us to respond and work with the school districts to make this a little bit, because, you know, like Mr. Salter said, the stormwater maintenance and management in the county is woefully behind. Anytime you ride down any street when there's a heavy rain, you can see that. And we want to help, but not at the expense of our local businesses. So let me know at 3:30 on Thursday if y'all are interested in attending another Zoom. I'll be happy to send you the link.
Was there any discussion with county council about alternative sources of revenue? Did they investigate council of government? Did they investigate, you know, a use tax, something along those lines, to your knowledge?
I can't speak for all the things they did or did not investigate. I'm on the Central Midlands Council of Governments Board. I'm not aware of any requests coming across related to that, but that doesn't mean it hasn't come through. But I'm not sure what other avenues they've looked at.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a gigantic hole to try to dig your way out of. I mean, they've got $190 million in essentially debt, if you will,
Right.
to stormwater. You know, I can tell you when we build a building for our office, say we spend $1.5 million on it, about $150,000 of it goes towards stormwater. By the time we put in the plans, put in the actual, the work itself, and with the whole idea in mind that we're not impacting the environment any more afterwards than we were before.
Right.
We built the structure. And so it really does kind of sting a little bit to then have to have a recurring payment for that when we did all the work up front. You know, that's a tough one. And things have gotten a little bit tougher here on businesses. You know, Town of Lexington actually enacted, some recent changes for building use requirements, and those fees went up significantly. And so that's why you may see a few more empty buildings around town. I mean, it's certainly a potential. I've spoken to a few business owners who had plans to come into town but elected not to. And so we would even see the same thing. I mean, it's not a huge amount, but it does add up by the time you factor in your property tax and everything else. It's definitely, it can move the needle for some businesses, so.
Thank you, Mr. Salters. I also wanted to let everyone know that this is on the County of Lexington's website. Their previous meeting, it's about an hour and a half, and they have an extensive, detailed presentation.
Yeah, and their official presentations are linked out there as well, the PowerPoints and everything. So if you want to see some of that information, it's a good point. Thank you.
All right, Madam Chair, we will continue to move on. One of the things that I just want to remind everybody, tonight's presentations of these policies, that looks very intimidating on the agenda. Tonight, remember, what we're going to do with the policies is we're just going to give you like a quick preview of them tonight. So there's not really a discussion about them tonight. This is just for your information and a preview. Then actually in December, we'll actually bring them for first reading. So you'll have between now and December to look at them. If you'll recall, that's one of the requests I think got made previously, that you just like hey, here's where the policy is coming from, so you can use that context as you're reviewing it for the first time. So that's what we've decided to do. I didn't want y'all to panic over the fact that we're going to discuss then what looks like 8 or 9 policies. So we're going to do a first reading of those policies in December. And then our second reading of those policies will be in January, where we will take our actual vote. So this is consider this like the trailer of a movie. You're going to see just a brief part of that tonight. And we have a couple from Mr. Caldwell and Mr. Stacy.
Thank you, Dr. Little. Madam Chair, members of the board, I actually, for student services, only have one. I think you have been provided a folder with some red line policies. One for student services is policy JFABF, which is students in foster care. And basically what this policy does is bring into policy what is currently our practice. It mandates now that we have a relationship with DSS, that we provide equal access to our students who are in foster care and with as little disruption and easier transition possible. It provides some common language and definitions around what foster care means, what the school of origin, costs involved, who the district's point of contact is, transportation processes, enrollment and student placement processes. So again, as Dr. Little said, we provided this for you for your review. So over the next month, if you have any questions, certainly contact our office. And in December, we will bring this policy with a little bit more detail to you and ask for a first reading.
Mr. Caldwell, how many students do we have in foster care in Lexington?
Totally anticipated that question about 20 minutes ago. So I don't know that, but I can certainly find that out.
Mr. Caldwell, I did read a little bit in there that we want to try and keep the student in their home school if at all possible.
That's right.
Does the McKinney-Ventnor come into play into that?
That is the same mentality, I guess, of the McKinney-Vento Act. A student who has become homeless or has been placed in foster care, if it is in that student's best interest, we have a determination hearing. And in most cases, yes, we do everything we can to keep them in their school of origin, which is why there's some information about transportation and the costs associated with that. If it is determined it's in the student's best interest to change schools, then of course we would do that as well. But normally we do try to keep those students in their home, in their school of origin.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Caldwell.
I have a question,
Yes,
Jada.
ma'am.
This is Jada. So how does this play into policy JFAB? Or is that just a completely different policy? Because I know JFAB mentions some things about living out of district, non-resident students.
Okay, I'm not looking at policy JFAB, but I'm assuming what that is. That's the policy that allows certain students to enroll who don't live in our district.
Right.
This really doesn't apply, because if a student becomes a ward of the state and is given to a foster family temporarily, that foster family probably lives in our district. If that student wanted to stay in their school of origin, they could do that. So if we had a student that was placed in foster care out of district, but wanted to remain in their school of origin, we would allow that to happen. It's not really a residency issue, or it's not really a special permission to come out of district. It is when a student's been temporarily displaced from their home for some reason.
Okay. Usually we just don't add a letter onto the end of a policy, so I didn't know if we were,
Yeah,
I didn't know.
as far as the codification goes to that, I can't speak to
Okay.
that, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Mr. Stacy, you have a number of policies. If you want to give us a quick overview of those.
Yes, sir. So the way the packet is for you, you'll notice that you've got the current board policy, and then you have a red line policy. And the red line policy is to the model policy from the School Boards Association. So what we do is we take the model policy from the School Boards Association, we red line it to make it the new policy. And so I wanted to include the old policy, or it's the current policy, that's in our school board policy manual, so you could see where they're going. And these are all related to recruitment and hiring policy updates. The first one, professional staff recruitment. Basically what we've done is we've just added some clarity, more than just principals and directors. So we talked central service administrators and other supervisors. And then the newer policy puts more emphasis on non-discrimination practices. The professional staff recruitment rule R really is an HR function, and so what this has done is it's updated the strategies that we utilize for recruitment, and you'll note that it's more electronic in nature. So those are the kinds of strategies that you'll see as it changes. Professional staff hiring policy, which is policy GCF. Again, we're just identifying this as an HR function. And what you'll see missing from this policy that's in our current policy is the background checks practices, and that has been moved to a brand new policy, GBEBDA. So you'll see that verbiage as you look through it. You'll see that it's been shifted into the new policy, because that's the new school board model policy. The professional staff hiring, the rules, we've notified, one of the things you'll note in there, it says something to the effect about notifying applicants if they didn't submit in a timely fashion and they submitted their application after the deadline. Well, really, they can't do that in our new practice, because the front line, you have to do it electronically, and when the position closes, you can't add another application. But we notify all our applicants when they apply, whether they got, if they didn't receive it, they get notification. And then at the bottom, it talks about the teaching positions and who interviews and who processes those. We really have outgrown this process. Back when I first came to Lexington School District 1, oh my God, I lost his name before Mary. Dick Thompson. Dick Thompson literally interviewed every single person that was hired in Lexington 1. When I came here as a principal at White Knoll High School, I was blown away, because I had never had the HR person sit down with me and interview. He literally interviewed every teacher that came into this district. Well, I think since White Knoll was built, we've probably built like 15 or 16 schools. We've more than doubled in size, and that's just not going to happen. We just don't have the capacity to do that. So that policy reflects more, giving more emphasis to our principals and other supervisors to make that process happen. I spoke to you about the new policy, criminal record checks. This is GBEBDA. This is a brand-new policy, but we took the verbiage from our old policies that related to background checks. And by state law, we have to do a SLED check, National Sex Offender Registry. And then, of course, we have to do the immigration check. And so that outlines that all for you. And then there's one for certified. There's also for support staff hiring. And again, basically, we moved the background stuff to GBEBDA because a B policy, GB means for all employees. GC means for certified employees, and GD means for support staff employees. So this is now a GB because we do the same thing for every employee that comes. So you can read through that. And then you got support staff hiring. The change here was primarily, again, given permission for people beyond the principal and department head, so it's administrator and/or supervisor. And so if you have like a head custodian and they were interviewing for housekeepers, they would have the opportunity to be involved in that evaluation. And then finally, GDFR, which is support staff hiring. You're going to see some verbiage here, and I just wanted to make note. There's a red line version, and when I read it the first time, when I got it from Meredith Falls, I'm like, this is the exact same thing. Well, it's really not. On the first page, you'll see support staff, and then the second page, you'll see where it talks about new licensed professional. And so the difference is those are like nurses, school nurses, licensed professionals, and they're treated a little bit different. So you'll see that verbiage in those policies. And again, if you don't have anything more to do, I've given you a lot of reading material to read through for the next board meeting. Any questions?
Can I make a request? I don't know if this is.
Can.
If we're going to use this process and get these, is there any way you could put a footer on these with the date and time so that we know which version we pull out of a folder? That's just a management thing. That would just be extremely helpful because we do sometimes get a lot of different paper copies of, and that just let me know that this was the first or the second. It's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Board, are there any questions or comments on any of Dr. Little's many presentations there? And Dr. Little, anything else you want to add?
No, Madam Chair, that is all that I have.
Okay. At this time, Board, we're going to move to 11.0, which is board information. Included in your packet is the monthly general fund financial report through October of 2020, the monthly general fund budget transfers through October of 2020, the monthly capital projects report through October of 2020, and the monthly unauthorized procurement report through October of 2020. And before we adjourn, I would like to invite everyone to our now December 1st, 2020 meeting. Judge Spence will join us to swear in Ms. Henson, Ms. Green, Mr. Anderson, and Dr. Powers. And that's always just a reaffirmation of democracy in action. Right here, the voters have spoken, and these people will be sworn in, and they will continue to serve you for the next 4 years. That's always an exciting event. And I personally would like to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. And I just want to say I am so thankful for this district and so thankful for our teachers and our educators. It has been a hard year, and we are thankful for what every single person is doing to help our students and our children. And I hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving.
Ms. Smith, I'd like to say that I am thankful for you and your 20 years of service to this board.
thank
Thank
you,
you
Ms.
so
Green.
much.
I'd like to
Yeah,
reiterate on that. I missed the last meeting, unfortunately, and with your big send-off. And also, I do want to tell you how wonderful it has been to work with you over the last 4 years. I've known you all 20 that you've been here, but over the last 4 years, you've helped me grow personally and professionally, and I appreciate that so
Thank you,
much.
Mr. Anderson.
And with that, do you want me to make a motion to adjourn?
Well, wait just 1 minute. I just
All
want
right.
to say that we had a 16-vote discrepancy, and if anybody's wondering why I'm still here, we had to wait for the county to certify by law to certify our candidates. So typically, I wouldn't be here. So anyway, thank you for the extra meeting. At this time, Mr. Anderson, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anderson. Do I have a second? Thank you, Ms. Green. All in favor of adjournment and going home and eating some turkey, please stand up. Thank you, guys.